Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is The Dark Half by Stephen King. Now, The Dark Half was published in 1989, and this I actually think is one of Stephen King's more underrated books, because you really don't hear too many people really talking about this book as much as they do his books like It, or The Stand, or Cujo, or Pet Sematary, but I actually think this is a really good book and has a very interesting premise. And basically the premise of the book is, what if you were being terrorized by a ghost who wanted revenge on you, but it wasn't the ghost of a dead person, rather the ghost of a man who never existed, and that's the basic premise of The Dark Half. Now, the plot of The Dark Half is, it's about an author named Thad Beaumont who has written a couple of books. However, he's only written 2 books under his real name. Now, the books he's written under his real name are highly acclaimed books, but they don't sell very well, and unfortunately they're considered to be somewhat pretentious. But he has a pen name, George Stark, and the books he's written under the pen name George Stark sell very well, but these books are less intellectually driven and are more like pulp novels and are much more violent. But what happens is, one day this guy figures out that him and George Stark are the same person, and he blackmails him and threatens to go to the press with this information. So then Thad just gets the idea to do it himself, and he reveals to the media that him and George Stark are in fact the same person, and he basically gives up writing under the George Stark pseudonym, and as a joke, him and his wife even take a picture for People magazine of them standing over what is supposed to be George Stark's grave, meaning that they figuratively have killed George Stark. So what ends up happening is, after all this is over and done with, is a series of murders begin happening, and all the people getting murdered are people who have had something to do with Thad giving up writing under the George Stark pseudonym. And what makes matters even stranger is Thad's fingerprints were found all over the crime scenes. So at first the police think he committed the murders, but he manages to prove to them that he was somewhere else during the times all these murders were taking place, but some of the police still think that he had something to do with these murders. Now, in the story, you begin following a character named Alan Pangborn, who is the sheriff of Castle Rock, which is a town that gets featured in a lot of Stephen King's books, and basically he gets involved with this because the murders actually begin in Castle Rock, and now he's investigating into these murders, trying to figure out who actually committed the murders. But it turns out there is something supernatural going on. It turns out that Thad Beaumont's pen name, George Stark, has literally come to life as a living entity and now wants revenge on Thad for killing him as he sees it. Now, I really enjoyed The Dark Half. I thought it was a very interesting book, and I thought the premise of the book, the whole idea of a fictional character literally coming to life, I thought was a really cool idea. And in the book, there's actually a lot of commentary on problems I think a lot of writers run into, because the book makes a lot of commentary about how serious novels never seem to sell as well as novels that are just meant for pure entertainment. Now, Stephen King, I think, is an author who does a really good job at combining serious fiction with entertaining fiction, but the book definitely makes a statement about how serious fiction is never as successful as entertaining fiction. Now, the book also seems to be kind of a statement on the art of writing in general, because the book talks a lot about how when you write something, you're almost like playing God in a way, like you're creating worlds words when you write a story, and the book takes this to kind of a literal extreme because in the story, Thad Beaumont literally ends up playing God, which I don't want to give too much away about the story, but at a certain point in the book, he actually ends up controlling supernatural forces that he doesn't understand. Now, I believe Stephen King wrote this book as kind of a statement on his pen name, Richard Bachman. Now, for those of you who don't know, early in Stephen King's career, he actually wrote a couple of books under a pen name, Richard Bachman, and those books were Rage, The Long Walk, The Running Man, Roadwork, and Thinner, and I know later on he wrote a book called The Regulators under the Richard Bachman pen name, but I believe at that point it was already found out that him and Richard Bachman were the same person, but I believe this book was written as kind of a response to when he got found out that him and Richard Bachman were in fact the same author. Now, most Stephen King fans already know this, but a lot of Stephen King's books kind of interlock with each other, and in this book they actually make references to the events from Stephen King's earlier books like The Dead Zone and Cujo, and also the character of Alan Pangborn in this book would actually go on to be the main character in Stephen King's book Needful Things. In the book, there's also a very funny Creepshow reference, which I don't think is meant to be a legitimate connection to Creepshow, but it's definitely a reference to Creepshow, and if you've seen the movie Creepshow, and if you read this book, you know which reference I'm kind of talking about. Now, this book was made into a movie in 1993. Now, the movie was directed by George A. Romero. Now, in the movie, the character of Alan Pangborn was actually played by Michael Rooker. That same character would end up getting played by Ed Harris in the movie version of Needful Things. But yeah, that's my review on The Dark Half by Stephen King. It's a book I would definitely recommend reading, and bye.